The first time we see creativity in the first time the Oxford English Dictionary lexicographers have been able to find it is 1875, which is really late for almost any word. As I mentioned, we don't really actually use it in a regular way until till several decades later. But the term creativeness was also quite rare, but more common than creativity for a long time. And I think this is my hypothesis, is that creativeness is a little bit easier to grab. It's like this soup tastes like carrot. It's got a real carrotness. The NESS suffix is quite comfortable to us. It's a Germanic suffix. ITY is Latin, and that's what we use when we coin scientific terms. And creativity surpassed creativeness only in the around 1950. And that's when this group of psychologists first took up the term. And it happened quite suddenly. The president of the American Psychological Association, his name was J. Paul Guilford. He used his speech that year. I don't know if it was actually in 1949 or 1950, but anyway, it was the 1950 issue of the journal that it appeared in. It was called Creativity. And he said that creativity is an area that psychologists have feared to tread. We've been focusing on little things. He was referring to behaviorism, which was the kind of reigning mode of psychology at that moment, which was a lot of that research was done on rats. It was very much about kind of these little neural kind of networks and behavioral responses to things. It had sort of distanced itself from big questions of metaphysics, of genius, of the kind of higher things. And so Guilford wanted a psychologist to get back to this. But he himself was actually a psychometrician. So he was actually a very empirical kind of psychologist who was involved with mental testing. And so what he was actually trying to do is to reorient the science of mental testing, which had been obsessed with intelligence, and reorient it toward creativity, what he called creativity, which for him was kind of a broader scope, which would involve big questions of genius and of the higher sort of aspects of humanity, but which would also include more pedestrian moments of cleverness or of problem solving. And I can get into why kind of that was important, that it encompassed both of those things. But so following his lead, many psychologists through the 50s and early 60s gravitated toward creativity research. And they did it in many different ways, using many different methods. It attracted a lot of funding. Most of that early funding was from the military. The Office of Naval Research, which was kind of the first big military funding apparatus for basic scientific research. The National Science Foundation, which was also founded in 1950, the same year as Guilford's speech. And there were lots of different conferences about creativity research, people sort of gathering around it. And the word actually matters, right? Because some of those people may have been doing research on what they called problem solving. They might have been doing research on what they called creative intelligence. They might have been doing research on art in children, art education. Some of them may have been doing research on genius scientists, right? But they all kind of were able to come together around this vague concept of creativity, which kind of encompassed all of those things. And I think it's important that it encompassed all of those things. It, from the beginning, had a quite practical use. As I mentioned, like the National Science Foundation, they went to this guy, Calvin Taylor, and they said, hey, we need to find a testing regime to identify the best scientists for some kind of graduate student fellowship that we're doing. And he, having just heard Guilford's speech, said, well, we really need to identify creative scientists. That's who we're going to need to stay ahead of the Soviets and to develop new products for the consumer economy. These are kind of the two sides of the American dominance after World War II. And so you're going to need to give us more money to research this new topic, this new frontier. And so the National Science Foundation funded these conferences that happened every couple of years in Utah, where all these people gather and talk about kind of all these various aspects of this concept that's starting to kind of concretize around creativity. And I can say a lot more about that, but the one thing that I'll add is that from the beginning, a lot of the people who were attending and who were involved in the committees in those conferences were research directors at corporations, in various military branches. They were the people who were responsible for creating real technological and consumer innovation. So the center of this creativity conversation was not artists. It was not people in literature. It was not at first people in childhood education. This really had a very practical business and tech and engineering focus from the beginning. And I think that set the tone for a lot of what followed after.